We've spent the past month savoring the tastes and aromas of food related folklore mentioned in some works of modern African literature. We started in the world of Libyan writer Ibrahim Al-Koni's Al-Majus, or The Animist, drinking tea with the Tuareg and observing the ceremony of the three teas. We then traveled down the West African coast, chopping, as we say, rice related folklore through Guinean writer Kamara Lai's The African Child, Accra, with Nigerian writer Wole Soyinka's Ake, The Years of Childhood, and Yams, with Ghanaian writer Yagiasi's Homegoing. The only thing lacking right now is the palm wine, but that's a discussion for another time, later this year maybe. And so, meanwhile, in this week's episode, we will continue chopping yams and with them, another popular West African root staple, cassava. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Mythological Africans podcast, where we read and talk about stories from African mythology and folklore. I am your host, Helen Tunde. Why yams and cassava hide in the ground. A Sierra Leonean folktale. A long, long time ago, the people in the village of Kane thought yams and cassava were devils. No one ate or planted them. They didn't even dare touch them. Many of the village people had heard strange stories of yams dancing in the moonlight and cassava roots performing strange ceremonies after the sun was low in the sky. All the village people were curious about these strange doings, but nobody did anything about it. The people of Kane always ate rice and greens and fish and whatever meats the hunters killed. While there was plenty of food in the village, there was happiness and laughter in every house. But after a long, long dry season, hunger came and sat down in Kane. The cooking pots were empty, and the children's stomachs were hard and tight. The evening fires were lit, but there was nothing to cook. The rice crop spoiled. The patches of grains dried up. Fish disappeared because the riverbeds were dry. Truly, hard times had come to Kane. Every day, soft crying was heard because the hunger was so great. One day, as the village people sat silently in the sun, there came the sound of marching feet. Up the path came a column of loud singing, hard marching yams and cassava roots. The people took one look at this strange sight and ran to their houses. These were the little devils they had heard about. The yams marched all around town, making all kinds of rude noises and shocking the people with their frisky dancing. After a time, they marched off down the path that led to the forest and disappeared. From a crack in the door, Fode, the son of Famata, watched the strange doings. The things marching around did not look like devils to him. He kept his thoughts to himself, but early the next morning, Fode set his foot on the path that led to the forest. As he waited quietly on the dark path, along came the yams and cassava roots, marching and singing. Because there were so many of them, Fode was afraid and jumped behind a tree. From his hiding place, he watched them with hungry eyes. They looked like many roots he had eaten all his life, so why shouldn't the people of Kane eat these things when their stomachs were so empty? Yet, Fode did nothing but stare at them. As the column passed by, Fode caught sight of a big, fat yam, limping slowly, ever so slowly, far behind the others. "Aha!" said Fode, grabbing the yam by the head. "I will eat you, even if it kills me." The yam yelled and struggled, but Fode cut off its head and ran with him to his mother's cooking pot. And since there was nothing in the pot, he put the yam in the pot and added some water. for they sat nearby watching the pot to see if the yam would do anything strange. But after a time, he took the yam out and tasted it. It was sweet and delicious. He gave some to his mother and the rest of the family. They smacked their lips and licked their fingers, and everybody wanted to know where such fine food came from. For they had to tell them how he had caught the yam and how foolish they were for thinking that yams were devils and unfit to eat. Here they were sitting hungry while food marched through their town. The people learned how to catch the little devils, and they learned many ways to cook them. And back in the forest, the yams and cassava agreed that they must do something or else they would all be eaten up. They decided to hide. Let's hide in the ground, cassava suggested. And so they agreed. And that night, every yam and cassava in the whole country dug a hole and buried himself. But that did not stop the people of Fode's village. They took sticks and dug up the little devils and ate them. And so till today, yams and cassava are still hiding on the ground. But they have become the favorite food along the coast of West Africa. I thought this would be a fun story to wrap up our culinary exploration, so I will not do too deep a dive into commentary and analysis. We should talk a bit about cassava, however. So, cassava, or Manio esculenta, as it is known to the scientific world, is so well integrated into the cuisines of so many West African people. It truly shocked me to hear that the plant is actually not native to the African continent. But as it turns out, cassava, which is also known as yuca or manioc, is native to South America, where archaeological evidence shows that it was domesticated at least 4,000 years or so ago. And cassava was brought to the African continent by Portuguese traders from Brazil in the 16th century. It was introduced in the Congo, which is at the very heart of the continent, and so its consumption spread in all directions. Currently, cassava is cultivated as a major food crop from the island of Madagascar in the southeast to Senegal and Cape Verde in the northwest. And its popularity comes from the fact that it's very hardy and drought resistant, so it makes it a reliable food source. It's also easy to grow with other crops. Matter of fact, cassava is a popular intercrop with yams, for which it serves as a support for the yams vines. In Cameroon, where I come from, cassava is the starting point for so many favorite foods like garri and watafufu and kumkum and miondo and bobolo. And you just have to go look this up to see what they are. I have some references in the episode notes. And all these foods involve some variety of the combination of soaking and fermenting and crushing and drying and then cooking the roots. Garri in particular, and this the best way I can describe garri is that it's granulated cassava roots, is especially popular across West Africa. And shout out to all my boarding school graduates. If you know, you know. Given the state of affairs and what we know about yams from last week's episode, you might wonder, as I know I did, why cassava and yams, two foods which are staples across the continent, could ever have been considered evil. What exactly is the subtext to their negative characterization in this story? And for this, I have two theories. First, cassava and yams, like many other roots, can be extremely toxic, poisonous. Cassava roots and leaves, which are also eaten in some parts of the continent, contain toxic enough levels of the cyanogenic glycoside, Linamarin. Improper preparation can lead to cyanide poisoning, and we all know that's no joking matter, right? And this is why, to reduce the level of cyanide, traditionally cassava roots are either thoroughly boiled or soaked in water and fermented before cooking. Yams fall under the genus Dioscorea, and so dioscorine, which is an alkaloid toxin found in the roots of the plant, is the compound to watch for here. Now, dioscorine is toxic enough, it's been used as arrow poison, so again, not a joking matter. And there is evidence to suggest that many of the prohibitions and rituals around the many New Yam festivals of West Africa are designed to make sure people wait until the yams are safe enough to harvest and consume. Another thing this story made me think about is the fact that widespread yam consumption on the continent emerged from encounters between hunter-gatherer forest people, to whom wild yams are still a very important and sometimes even sacred plant, and southward migrating people fleeing desertification of the Sahara or conflict coming in from Islamic conquest or whatever. And so these encounters between Africans and who lived in cities and the forest hunter gatherers, they were not always friendly. And so it's possible that this story records one of such encounters, especially when we consider where cassava was first grown on the continent. If you know anything about the Congo Basin, it is where most of the hunter gathering people are found. But this is a theory, though, so if you're going to quote me cautiously. Here is our fun fact for the week. Did you know that the technique for making garri from cassava roots was introduced in Sao Tome in about 1780? I know I didn't. Either way, this brings us to the end of our month-long food fest, and I will see you next week, but you'll have to read the June newsletter to hear what we'll be talking about. Thank you, as always, for listening.